will, please join me in prayer. Dear Lord, may you open our hearts and minds as I speak this morning. May you be with us here as I speak of your love and greatness in my life. Amen. Today is a day that normally I would be just like everybody else, sitting and waiting to hear a pastor's message. When I was younger, this was more of a chore than anything else. I remember coming to church and being shushed when my sister and I were too loud in the pews. Or I remember counting the lights in the ceiling and squinting my eyes so that they all looked like stars in the middle of the day. When I was younger, I knew about God. I had heard and learned about him at Sunday school, but I didn't fully understand his presence in my everyday life. Our parents made sure we knew our Bible stories, the Lord's Prayer, the Ten Commandments, and the Apostles' Creed. It was something we would do before we went to bed every night. When I was old enough, I began to be an athlete. At first, I was scared by such a daunting and honorable task. I remember Rachel and Mike Skenfield walking me through how to light the candles and their duties of the job. Yet soon, that too became routine. I fell into the drone of left candle, right candle, bowed, snuffed the light. It became another chore at church. I felt like church was always a burden. My other friends never went to church. Their weekends allowed them to sleep in for 2 days instead of 1. They weren't obligated to attend a 2-hour service and sit still and try and pay attention while a very powerful and comforting voice spoke of things I couldn't just comprehend yet. I was frustrated that I couldn't enjoy my weekend like my peers. I never minded being sick on Sundays since it meant that I got to sleep in. Looking back, I feel ashamed of it. I feel as if I were letting God down by not being proud of my church or my religion. When I started middle school, I felt so grown up. And when I felt grown up, I felt like I knew a lot too. I would talk with my friends who didn't go to church or that went to other churches and try and have conversations with them about God. I found myself arguing with no supportive knowledge other than Bible stories and prayers. I was frustrated that I didn't know as much as I wanted to about God. Then I started confirmation. My first year was with Pastor Eric. We discussed parts of the Bible and the importance of the books and disciples. I learned more and felt even more prepared then when people asked me why I didn't sleep in on Sundays. Yet for my second year, I had our pastor, Doug. Pastor asked me what I wanted to learn. He took an interest in what I wanted to know and let our study go from there. Amy, who joined the confirmation class, and I would meet with Pastor on Mondays and study the book of Psalms since that was my favorite book in the Bible. I remember one day we went to Pizza Plus and we ordered breadsticks and we discussed what vocation meant. Vocation is your calling, your job. I remember being confused why you couldn't just call it a job. But Pastor illuminated the idea that vocation isn't just a job. It's what God wants you to do also. It's what you were meant for in a way. As a Christian, what was my vocation? Was it to show up at church on Sundays? Was it to read the Bible before I go to bed? I wondered what that meant for me and how my vocation is more than just a few fancy words for a job. In the meantime, I graduated from confirmation and became an official member of Faith Lutheran. I grew up in this church, and that day I realized that I was officially a part of it. I can remember going to preschool here and playing in the playground and having meetings with Pastor Ken on certain days where we would talk about God, and his questions would always lead to his lesson plan. I remember on Sunday mornings when my family brought fellowship, we would always bake brownies, and I would always sneak some before everybody ate them because I love them so much. I remember the library upstairs and having Sunday school with Sharon Stout and later Mom and Dad. I remember most of your faces when I was younger and how you all were my second family. I remember helping the ladies in the kitchen when they brought in fellowship, especially Nancy Charlton, who taught me how to make coffee and how to arrange things nicely on plates. This church was my home. Regardless of if I knew the full meaning of my faith or not. It was home, regardless of the fact that I found it a chore to show up. So many things about this building These pews and the people that sit in them have shaped me today. With the generosity of the congregation, the summer going into 8th grade, Amy and I went to Mount Cross for a Lutheran Bible camp. I was so nervous but excited. I couldn't wait to meet other people who shared the same faith that I did. I couldn't wait to meet other people that went to church on Sundays and that knew what the Lord's Prayer was. I remember driving with Pastor and Amy and feeling the anticipation as we drove up. I had my disposable camera and I was ready for new friends. I believe we were a little late, but we made it just in time for the camp cheering session. I was immersed in this crowd of people chanting silly songs. That day was July 31st, and my birthday is August 1st. I wasn't expecting anyone to know my birthday, and I didn't remember telling anyone, but the counselors knew, and they gave me a huge surprise. The next morning, I was forced to wear a birthday crown, and my cabin counselors had decorated my whole bed with confetti strings. The whole camp sang happy birthday while they hoisted me onto a table so that I could see everybody's beaming faces as my embarrassment was highest level. I had a ton of fun and met so many awesome people, and one girl I still talk with from time to time. But the thing that I loved the most about this camp, about the whole experience, was that I had grown so much in my faith. All of these people were talking of God and being young and what it means to be a young Christian in today's world. It was like I was able to finally make the connection between who I was and what my faith meant to me. Those 5 days changed who I was as a social person and who I was as a spiritual person. One day at camp during our lesson group, the pastor that was there wrote something on my paper. She wrote, "You are a woman of God. Let him shine through you, and you will do great things." I was so touched by these words. First, she called me a woman of God, and at 13, that seemed pretty awesome. I didn't feel like she didn't care how old I felt like she didn't care how old I was. I had the power within me that was strong. Then, that I was a woman of God. I wasn't just a woman, but that God was with me too. That I shared myself with him, and that I followed him, and I was not wrong in doing so. Let him shine through me, and I will do great things. This was so powerful. I still have that piece of paper in my Mount Cross box at home in the closet. I still bring it out from time to time to reflect on how much I changed since then. From Mount Cross, I went on to school and returned to a world where my peers didn't have the same values and barely knew about God. I returned to a world where boys and drama were the main focus in a girl's life. I fell back into step with these ideals and fell from what I had learned. In high school, things began to change again. High school is a time to learn who you are as a person and figure out what you want to do in life. As a Christian, we all know the proper answer: to follow the 10 Commandments and live a holy life as much as possible. I was not so focused on that aspect going into high school. I was focused on being liked by my friends the best, and I was always after a boy at some point. I was so determined that I forgot something very important: that God is always one step ahead of me. God knew that I was not with him as much as he wanted me to be. He wasn't punishing me for it, but I know that he put certain events in my life to show me the way back to him. I had heartbreak, death, and friendships that were all life-changing for me. First, there was heartbreak. I had liked this boy for a very long time, and finally we had something, but he decided it wasn't right and I wasn't the girl and broke it off. I put this boy on a pedestal and allowed myself to be engrossed by him, and that made it really hard for me to break free. He was the first boy that broke my heart, and I didn't really understand why God would allow this to happen the way it did. It took me a very long time to realize that it was a lesson to keep a guarded heart. God was warning me against letting a boy be the center of my world. After that, I knew I had to be more in control of who I was and how I handled boys. Yet this last year, I had my heart broke again. The lesson I learned from it was that I cannot give so much of my faith in a boy that is just a boy of words. The boy showed me that even if you are a Christian and you love God, it doesn't mean you are a true Christian. Then, the death of 3 relatives swallowed me. My aunt and uncle died within a year of each other, and it was the first time someone in my family died that I was close to. Yet the most painful death was my Uncle Craig. He was my dad's younger brother and one of the cool uncles according to my sister and I. He knew so much about sports, and especially movies. You could bring up almost any movie and he could quote it or tell you a fun fact about it. The thing I remember most about Craig was his humor. He was so quick and witty. He and Dad would tag team at Christmas, and I loved seeing them interact. It made me think of Rachel and I. His diagnosis hit hard. I took it as a personal slam from God. Cancer had been such a huge part of my life. I never had it, but it felt like everyone around me did. My junior year in English, we had an assignment to write a poem to our heroes. It could be anyone and everyone. I wrote 3, and one of them was to Uncle Craig. I quietly sent it to him without telling anyone, and later I would read it at his memorial service. I remember when I wrote it, I wanted to talk about how inspiring he was. This man who had known so much sorrow and turmoil was so strong in his faith. A man that had been put through so much, and that he could be so true and faithful to a God that had given it to him all was phenomenal to me. I was in awe of how powerful Craig was with God. During his service, I could feel Craig around us in the church. He was in the pews as I read the poem. I could almost see him standing by his sons and comforting my dad and grandparents. I knew he was peacefully with God. I thanked God for giving him a place where he could all see us again. Before his death, my best friend, Caitlin Gerfeld's mother, was diagnosed with breast cancer. Luckily today, she is free of cancer and recovering. But it was hard for her and I, since she had known what my family had gone through. And it was scary to think that her mom was in the same danger. I hated cancer so much. It was my devil, and it was the one thing in this life I wish never existed. Everyone has a story involving cancer, and I hope to help be the reason why no one knows with someone with cancer. I'm making it my job to cure and fight cancer. I want to show it that it can take the ones I love, but I have something on my side that it doesn't. I didn't realize that within talking about Craig to my friend Kate, I revealed another very important part about being a Christian too. Kate was my only Christian friend. Through high school, we shared our faith quietly, and I went to her youth group once or twice before senior year. This year, after her mom's diagnosis, Kate dedicated her year to being a big sister to the underclassmen at Red Park. She started a girls-only Bible study on Friday mornings at Starbucks, which I attended, and she began to mentor the younger Christian girls. Through the duration of high school, her and I can proudly say we never went to a party with alcohol, did drugs, smoked tobacco, and we stayed abstinent. Not many high schoolers would be proud of this, but Kate and I were, and we let the younger girls know that they should be too, for the same reasons. Kate and I shared a bond that way. She was my rock. When I needed advice, when I was scared, when I needed a shoulder to cry on, she was always there.